You're seriously going to wear that to dinner with my colleagues? Jessica's voice dripped with disdain as she gestured at my simple button-down shirt and khakis. God, Ezran, sometimes I wonder what I saw in you. I stood in the doorway of our shared apartment, watching her apply another layer of expensive lipstick in the hallway mirror. The red dress she wore probably cost more than I made in a week at the community center where I worked as a program coordinator. At least that's what she thought. It's just dinner, Jess, I said quietly, adjusting my sleeves. I thought we were meeting your friends, not attending a board meeting. She whirled around, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light. Friends? Ezran, these aren't just friends. Minya Lone is a senior marketing director at Ashmoor Tech. David Williams runs his own consulting firm. And tonight, we're dining with Bastian Ashmoor himself, the CEO of Ashmoor Tech. Do you have any idea what kind of opportunity this could be for my career? I knew exactly who Bastian Ashmoor was, but I kept my expression neutral. I'm sure it'll be fine. Fine? Jessica's laugh was sharp. Nothing about this is fine. While I'm trying to network with actual successful people, I have to explain why I'm dating someone who makes $30,000 a year teaching kids to play basketball. The word stung even though I'd heard variations of them for months. Jessica had grown increasingly embarrassed by what she perceived as my lack of ambition. If only she knew the truth. Maybe I should just stay home, I offered, not for the first time. No. Her tone was firm. I already told them about you. Backing out now would be worse than showing up looking like you do. An hour later, we walked into Meridian, an upscale restaurant downtown where reservations were harder to get than concert tickets. Jessica had transformed into her professional persona, confident, charming, and completely dismissive of my presence. The hostess led us to a corner table where 3 people were already seated. Minya Lone, an elegant woman in her 30s, smiled warmly as we approached. David Williams, a heavy-set man with an expensive watch, nodded politely. And then there was Bastian Ashmoor. At 52, Bastian had the kind of presence that commanded attention without demanding it. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his navy suit impeccable. When he stood to greet us, his handshake was firm and his smile genuine. You must be Jessica, he said, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who'd spent years in international business. I've heard wonderful things about your work from Minya. Jessica practically glowed. Mr. Ashmoor, thank you so much for including us tonight. This is such an honor. Please call me Bastian. His eyes shifted to me. And you must be Ezran. That's right, I replied, shaking his hand. Something flickered in his expression, recognition, perhaps, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. As we settled into our seats, Jessica immediately launched into conversation about quarterly projections and market penetration strategies. She was good at her job, I had to admit, and watching her in her element reminded me why I'd fallen for her in the first place. So Ezran, Minya said during a lull in the business talk, Jessica mentioned you work with children. That must be rewarding. I coordinate youth programs at the Riverside Community Center, I explained. We run after-school activities, summer camps, mentorship programs. It keeps me busy. David leaned forward with polite interest. That's noble work. Must be challenging on a non-profit budget. Before I could respond, Jessica jumped in. Oh, it definitely is. Ezran is always talking about funding issues and how little they pay their staff. I keep telling him he should consider transitioning to something more substantial. The word hung in the air like smoke. I felt heat rise in my cheeks, but I kept my voice level. I enjoy the work. Of course you do, Jessica said with a patronizing smile. But enjoyment doesn't pay the bills, does it? I mean, you're 28 years old, Ezran. At some point, you need to think about the future. Bastian had been quietly cutting his steak, but I noticed he'd stopped chewing. His expression was unreadable. Minya, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, tried to steer the conversation elsewhere. The community center sounds like it serves an important function. These programs can really make a difference in kids' lives. Exactly, I said, grateful for her support. We've had students go on to college scholarships, start their own businesses, become teachers and social workers. It's about giving them opportunities they might not otherwise have. That's beautiful, Minya said sincerely. Jessica waved her hand dismissively. It's sweet, really. But at the end of the day, Ezran comes home exhausted from dealing with other people's problems, and for what? Barely enough to cover his half of the rent. The silence that followed was deafening. David studied his wine glass. Minya's face had gone carefully blank. Bastian set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. Jessica, he said quietly, May I ask what you think success looks like? She brightened, clearly thinking this was her moment to shine. Well, it's about growth, isn't it? Setting goals, achieving them, moving up in the world. Making a real impact through strategic thinking and measurable results. And you don't think Ezran is making a real impact? I mean, sure, on a small scale. But let's be honest, anyone can teach kids to play sports. It doesn't exactly require specialized skills or advanced education. I watched Bastian's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. The temperature at our table seemed to drop several degrees. That's interesting, Bastian said, his voice still calm but carrying an edge that made everyone pay attention. Because in my experience, the people who make the biggest difference are often the ones working quietly behind the scenes without recognition or fanfare. Jessica sensed she might be losing her audience, but she pressed on. Of course, community service is important. But there's a difference between volunteering and building a career. Ezran has potential, he just needs to apply himself to something more ambitious. Like what you do? Bastian asked. Well, yes. Marketing requires strategic thinking, creativity, understanding complex market dynamics. It's challenging work that requires real expertise. I see. Bastian reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Ezran, could I ask you a quick question about the Jackson project? The restaurant noise seemed to fade into background static. Jessica looked confused, but Minya and David suddenly went very still, as if they just realized something important. The timeline's still on track, I replied carefully. The contractors finished the foundation work last week, and we should have the framework completed by month's end. The kids are excited about the new gymnasium. Bastian nodded approvingly. And the budget? Under by about 8%, thanks to the partnerships we established with local suppliers. We'll be able to add the computer lab we discussed. The silence at the table was complete now. Jessica's face had gone pale, her mouth slightly open as she looked back and forth between Bastian and me. Excellent work as always, Bastian said, sliding his phone back into his pocket. Ladies and gentlemen, I should probably clarify something. Ezran isn't just a program coordinator at the Riverside Community Center. He's the founder and director of the Ashmoor Foundation's Community Outreach Initiative. David's eyes widened. Minya covered her mouth with her hand. Bastian continued, his voice carrying the authority that had built a tech empire. 3 years ago, Ezran came to me with a proposal. He wanted to create something different, not just another charity that throws money at problems, but a comprehensive program that would actually transform communities from the ground up. He presented a 50-page business plan that was more thorough and innovative than most corporate strategies I've seen. Jessica's face had gone from pale to ashen. The Ashmoor Foundation now operates 12 community centers across the state, serving over 3,000 families annually. We've helped launch 47 small businesses, sent 96 kids to college on full scholarships, and reduced youth crime rates by 37% in the neighborhoods where we operate. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I kept my focus on my plate. Ezran manages an annual budget of $12 million, Bastian said. He oversees a staff of 240 people across multiple locations. He's been offered positions at Harvard, Yale, and Stanford to head their community development programs, but he turns them down because he believes the work is more important than the prestige. The words settled over the table like a heavy blanket. Jessica's breathing had become shallow, her perfectly manicured hands trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. The salary for his position, Bastian continued, is $230,000 annually, plus benefits and performance bonuses. But Ezran requested that his official title remain simply Program Coordinator, because he doesn't want the children and families he serves to feel intimidated by corporate hierarchy. David cleared his throat. That's remarkable. It is, Bastian agreed. Ezran is one of the most brilliant strategic minds I've ever encountered, and more importantly, he's one of the few people I've met who genuinely doesn't care about personal recognition. He measures success not by his own advancement, but by the advancement of others. I finally looked up to find Bastian watching me with something that might have been pride. When I heard Jessica worked in marketing, I was curious to meet the woman who'd captured the attention of someone I consider to be not just an employee but a friend. The weight of Jessica's stare was almost physical. Her mouth opened and closed several times before any sound came out. Ezran, she whispered, why didn't you tell me? I met her eyes for the first time all evening. You never asked what I actually did. You just assumed. But you said you worked at the community center. You said you coordinated programs. I do work at the community center. I do coordinate programs. I never lied to you, Jessica. You just decided that what I did wasn't important enough to learn more about. Bastian stood up, signaling the end of the evening. Minya, David, always a pleasure. Jessica, it was enlightening to meet you. He turned to me. Ezran, I'll see you at the board meeting Tuesday morning. The investors are excited to hear about the expansion plans. As Bastian walked away, Minya and David offered polite goodbyes and quickly followed. Jessica and I sat alone at the table, the weight of the evening settling between us. Ezran, she began, her voice small. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. You had every opportunity to have an idea, I interrupted quietly. For 8 months, you've made assumptions about who I am and what I'm worth based on your own narrow definition of success. You've been embarrassed by me, ashamed of me, and you've made sure I knew it. But if you'd just told me... Told you what? That I had Bastian Ashmoor's personal cell phone number? That I could afford a better apartment if I wanted one? Would that have changed how you felt about the work itself, or just how you felt about being seen with me? She had no answer for that. I stood up, leaving enough cash on the table to cover our portion of the dinner. The truth is, Jessica, you were right about one thing. We do want different futures. The difference is I'm already living mine. As I walked toward the exit, I heard her call my name one final time, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the city hummed with its usual energy, full of people pursuing their own definitions of success, their own versions of meaning. I pulled out my phone and saw a text from Bastian. Well handled. That woman clearly didn't deserve you. Another message waited from Minya. If you ever want to discuss partnership opportunities, I'd love to take you to lunch. Proper lunch where we actually talk about the work you do. I smiled, sliding the phone back into my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd go back to the community center where 12-year-old Aisha would probably want to show me her improved math scores, and where Mrs. Rodriguez would update me on her son's college applications. There would be budget meetings and program evaluations, partnership discussions and strategic planning sessions. There would be work that mattered, with people who understood that success isn't measured by the size of your office or the price of your clothes, but by the lives you touch and the positive change you create in the world. And for the first time in months, I wouldn't have to apologize for who I was or justify the choices I'd made. Some people spend their lives climbing ladders. Others build the foundations that make climbing possible. I knew which one I was, and I was proud of it.